This is Tulip Bantu Knots, this is Venus McFlytrap, and this is a tweet that popped up in my Twitter feed. I've never customized a doll before, but let's see if I can bring this concept to life. Before we can get started, I need the most important part of this entire project, a Venus McFlytrap Monster High doll, specifically the newer design with molded braids. Luckily, this local toy shop had a bunch of them in stock, so after sifting through about 20 Venus McFlytraps, I've found one that I'm finally happy with, so let's buy her and take her home. Okay, I'm back home, she's out of the box, and now it's time to cut off this beautiful green and pink braided hair. I really love G3 Venus's braids, so this kind of feels really wrong, but I'm sure it'll be worth it in the end. Venus is now sufficiently bald, but this pink paint also needs to go. I'm using acetone or nail polish remover for this, as it will wipe away the colour but not damage the plastic. Like I mentioned before, this G3 Venus has molded braids on the side of her head, and whilst they do look great, I need to remove them to make space for her new Tulip Bantu Knots hairstyle. Snipping off each of the plastic braids with nail clippers seemed to work pretty well, but it's left a bunch of like gross, scraggly edges, so I'm gonna use my kind of scary Dremel tool to sand these down. Okay, I have brushed off the Dremel dust, and I've sketched on some kind of rough hair parting lines, and she's looking pretty good to be honest. But as you can see, we now have a whole new problem to solve. Wow, what a terrible joke. Venus has a lot of holes in her head from where her braids once were, and whilst her new hairstyle will cover a few of them up, these holes might affect the scalp painting process. Superfine Milliput is a 2-part epoxy putty, and it's what I'm going to use to fill up Venus's hair holes. Oh, hair holes sounds disgusting. And just to be safe, I'm covering up Venus's face with some cling film and masking tape because Milliput bonds to plastic, so I don't want to risk getting any on her face. About 4 hours later, the epoxy putty has cured, so now I can sand down any bumps and lumps and paint her head green. And oh my god, let me tell you about this shade match. It feels like those TikToks where people find their perfect foundation match and it kind of just like blends into their skin. It was so satisfying. Anyway, Venus has so far endured a buzz cut, braid removal surgery, and a full scalp makeover. So I think it's time that we give her a brand new hairdo. If you didn't notice before, Tulip Bantu Knots is a twist on the traditional African hairstyle Bantu knots. In my original illustration, the knots have been replaced with colourful tulips, which is very fitting for a plant-themed doll like Venus. When I feature natural hairstyles within my work, I always try my best to draw them accurately and respectfully. I like to create the effect of styled hair by layering 3 key elements. 1, the parted sections, 2, the hair strands, and 3, the parting highlights. To start things off, I need to paint the parted sections. There are different patterns that can be used here, but to match my original illustration, I've chosen to paint a simple grid pattern all across Venus's scalp. Next up, the hair strands. To really sell the effect of tightly twisted hair, I'm layering light and dark pink lines over the parted sections using a super thin brush. Now I can add the parting highlights. When hair is parted, the scalp skin underneath often appears lighter because the hair protects it from direct sunlight, so I'm using a little bit of a lighter shade of green to mimic this. She is looking so cute, but there is still a very important detail that I need to paint on. Now, Venus did have edges, or baby hairs, when I initially took her out of the box, but they were kind of not to my liking, so I'm gonna redo them. Because these edges are literally front and center on Venus's face, the last thing that I want to do is mess them up, so I'm sketching them out with a pencil. These light pencil guidelines will make it much easier for me to focus on my line width when painting over the top. These new curlier edges really tie this style together, and honestly the before and after is crazy. Speaking of crazy, it's time for me to go crazy whilst rolling out a bunch of microscopic polymer clay tulips. Okay, so they're not quite microscopic, but they are small enough that they squish with the lightest touch, and making them a consistent size is actually much harder than it looks. Oh my god, this took way longer than I expected, but I finally got a batch of mini clay tulips, which I can now bake, allow to cool, and paint. To avoid getting paint all over my fingers, I'm sticking these flowers down onto some lollipop sticks using a strip of double-sided tape. These will be the pink ones, and these will be the green ones. After a few thin layers of paint, I can add some darker stripes to represent the petals. This gives pretty much the same effect as sculpting them on, but it takes a fraction of the time. Now that they've been painted, I'm going to add some extra dimension by using some painted tissue paper petals. These are much less fragile than clay petals, and I can kind of bend them into place after gluing them on. Okay, now that I have a mini bouquet's worth of tulips, I can start to attach these to Venus's head. And since they're made out of polymer clay, super glue should work pretty well at sticking them on securely. Okay, it's time to put her clothes back on and see how she looks. I am so happy with how she has turned out. It did take longer than expected and it was kind of challenging at some points, but I think the final result, it's honestly made it all so worth it. A lot of people said that they would love to see an official Venus McFlytrap with tulip bantu knots. Mattel, if you see this, reach out. I would love to, I don't know, give you permission? I don't know. Okay. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.